Talking about 4 areas of my life, and this reads like a romance novel. We've got some romance, mystery, inspiration, frustration, and of course there's redemption in the end. I'd like to point out the photo on your left is Liz and myself leaving on our honeymoon in 1966. Check out the hat, check out the corsage, check out the gloves. Photo on the right was a photo shoot done for the V magazine a few years ago. And that's our MGA, and that's Lizzie and me, professionally shot. Liz, you look spectacular, dear. Okay, we're going to hit 4 areas of my life. We're talking about my marriage to the lovely Lizzie, courtship to caregiver, 57 plus years, my military career, private to colonel, 31 years, my civilian career, trainee to manager, 35 years, and the only reason Liz and I are here is MG Sports Cars, admire through adventure, 42 plus years. As I was putting this presentation together, after about 3 glasses of wine, I said to myself, why did my life turn out this way? Why did I do the things I did? And so I said to Liz, there's more to this. Maybe I should tell them a little bit about how I got to where I graduated college. So I sat down, and these 9 things, I think, are principal to why I turned out the way I did. The first thing is 1950s suburbia. You all remember the 1950s? I'm telling you, from my point of view, it was the single best time to be in America. It was post-World War II. Everything was bustling. This country felt like it was going somewhere. It was an incredible time to live. I can remember my parents didn't care what I did or where I was, but my ass better be home for lunch and dinner. Because if I wasn't, I'd pay for it. Also in the 1950s, put your hats on here. In the 1950s, this is post-World War II, the workplace was changing. Women who had worked during World War II, their kids are now growing, they're going back into the workforce. So that means a second car. And chances are that second car would have been a British sports car, because GIs went to England first before they went to Europe, and they saw British sports cars, and so they fell in love with them. And then England had to export or die because their country was in ruin. So they started to flood the American area with sports cars. And of course, the GIs bought them. So that second car in the driveway was hopefully a British sports car. The second thing that really got me going, my parents bought a World Book Encyclopedia for my sister and myself when I was in the 4th grade. And I became addicted to it. I read every one of those volumes. I swear to God, I read every one of those volumes at least 3 or 4 times. And it taught me about different cultures. It taught me about the world. And then they gave me National Geographic. And guess what National Geographic taught me? There's all kind of naked women out there in Africa. I'm really growing up now. Jesuits at Loyola High School. I lived right up the street from the premier Catholic high school in greater Baltimore area. Taught by the Jesuits. Has anybody here ever had a Jesuit education? Okay, so you know where I'm coming from. So it was a magnificent facility, wonderful athletic fields, and so us kids would go over there and play in the afternoons. And the kitchen was run by Catholic brothers. And so they'd help umpire our games and take us in their kitchen and give us ice cream afterwards. But the Jesuits, when they were done teaching, would walk the grounds, and they would be reading the Bible, or they'd be reading a prayer book or something like that. But they always had time for us, and they always talked to us. And I became so enamored with the Jesuits that I asked my parents if I could invite one of them each Sunday over for Sunday dinner. And we did. We're not Catholic, we're low Episcopal, but my parents and I enjoyed those Jesuits, and those Jesuits taught me logic. They taught me to question everything I do, and so I'm very blessed that I was able to know those Jesuits. Sunny Surplus. How many people here remember surplus stores after WW2 in Korea? Okay? Well, I had this buddy, and he and I would go to Sunny Surplus, and we started to buy stuff. And we outfitted ourselves with boots and fatigues and helmets and backpacks and training rifles. And he and I would go out and attack the enemy every afternoon. We pretended to shoot a lot of rabbits and squirrels and dogs and God only knows what else. Little did we realize he grew up and went to West Point. I kind of grew up and went to OCS, and we reconnected at our 50th high school reunion, and it was a magic moment. And he and I both ended up being colonels.
What age were you there at the time?
I'm sorry?
What age were you there at the time?
I would probably have been 9 or 10 or 11. Okay. Towson High School. I have so much of my life to owe to that high school. This is in the late 50s. Towson was an incredibly booming area, high middle class. The teaching staff at Towson High School, it was more like a junior college. Our academic program, I would put up with any school in America at the time. And the teachers there really were able to focus on the kids. And I just felt like my mind was expanding and learning more and more and more. And more importantly, I learned how to do the twist. I learned about double dating. I learned about drive-in movies, better known as a passion pit. And Towson High School really prepared me for college. Amici's Drive-In. I want to tell you that was happening. If you know Happy Days or American Graffiti, I swear to God, Amici's was it. I mean, that on Friday, Saturday night, that place was hopping. And I'll give you a short story. Do you all know what mooning is? Okay, so we're at Amici's one evening in the summer, and these two girls, good-looking girls, pulling in a convertible with the top down, and this one guy jumps up and drops his trowel and moons her against the windshield. Being smart girls, they simply turned the wiper motors on fast speed, and the entire drive-in watched this guy jump off the car in anguish with his pants around his knees. But Amici's also taught me another important lesson. In order to have a good time, you have to know when to study and when to play. And that was the toughest lesson I learned, was to study rather than play. Lycos Pharmacy, I worked 4 years through college. I worked at least 40-plus hours a week. And Doc Lycos taught me more about salesmanship, taught me more about human relations, taught me more about life in general than any college course ever taught me. I started at 95 cents an hour, and after 4 years, I was so good, I was making $1.50.
It's still there.
Is Lycos still there?
Yes, I still go there.
Wonderful. They probably have the same cash registers. I'll tell you a real quick side story. When you all go to the pharmacy and they fill your prescription, if you get a chance, look at the pharmacist. He's got a little device. They're normally light blue with a cover, and he pours the pills out and he counts them. And then he puts the cover over, and that's how you fill your vial up. I did that in the 1960s. That's one industrial device that is the perfect invention. They've never changed it. University of Baltimore, right in the middle of Baltimore, very urban. The core classes were taught by tenured professors. The optional courses were taught by retired business executives. Wonderful place to go to school. Those retired executives really taught me about business. You can take all your, I don't want to offend any of you Ivy Leaguers, but you can take professors to a certain degree. The people that were teaching me in my optional courses, they were business leaders and they had done it. So they were able to impart that wisdom on me, and I'll be eternally grateful for that. The last one, I saved the last one for the best. Does anybody here remember the Baltimore Colts and Johnny Unitas? Okay. So, how do I say this nicely? Several of us college guys would meet on Sundays at one of our houses and watch the Baltimore Colts. This was a religion. In fact, if you're from Baltimore, do you remember Go to War, Miss Agnes? Go to war, Miss Agnes. That was what the TV announcer said until the network told him he couldn't say it anymore. So we have this football party. And we're doing great because us guys get there and smoke and joke and all that stuff. And one guy's sister says, I'm having my girlfriends over. So these girls come over, and we're just trying to watch the game. And all they're doing is trying to make small talk. And things are, okay, we'll put up with this crap. There's 3 seconds left. 3 seconds. The Colts going down the field. They're trying to kick a field goal to win the game. I mean, it's tense. And Miss Budinsky over there decides to get up and help herself to dip in chips and blocks out the 17-inch television. I wasn't happy. Long story short, we reconnected several weeks later, and the rest is history. The good news is the Colts won. And Liz and I have never forgiven the Baltimore Colts for moving to Indianapolis. Okay. So I graduated college, and we got married. To the left there is her parents and my parents. June of '66, we were married. The middle picture is me after basic training at Fort Jackson. That was a life experience. I mean, at that point, the draft was very big. And I'll tell you all one thing. We have an all-volunteer Army today, and that's great. That's over here. With the draft, you have a cross-section of America. Because the draftees, none of them wanted to be there. But they were there, and they did what they had to do. It was a cultural awakening for me because I met people from ghettos and areas mind-boggling. And then from Fort Jackson, I went to Fort McClellan for advanced infantry training, and then I went to Benning School for Boys. That's the nickname for Fort Benning. It's now the Benning School for Boys and Girls. And I went through Officer Candidate School, and it was a unique experience. It was incredible pressure. It makes you react. Sometimes there are people that will tell you that that kind of training works for the immediate effect that it gives you, but long range, it really hurts you down the road when you're in your 40s or 50s because you tend to jump rather than stop and think. Not me. And to this day, you've got the Military Academy, you've got ROTC, and you have OCS. OCS graduates are known as Mustangers. And that term is still sticks, and it's how you can, when you meet somebody from the service, if they say they were a Mustanger, that's OCS. Okay. So, graduated OCS, had my little, Liz pinned the bars on me. In the Army, they're called butter bars. And we went back to Fort McClellan. We were involved in this flood. Liz and I woke up one night, and she goes, Lee, there's water on the floor. So once again, instead of the 17-inch television blocking the field goal, she goes to turn the lights on. So thank God I grabbed her hand. Well, we survived that. Down below are two of my friends. We were all second lieutenants. We all knew we were going to go to Vietnam. We all knew we were going to die. So on the weekends, that's what you did. You partied. Lots of fine, wonderful memories. And I volunteered for Airborne, Ranger, Special Forces, and guess what they gave me? Jungle School. 3 weeks of the worst experience of my life. It so prepared me for Vietnam that aside from shooting at me, everything happened when I was at Jungle School. I had to hold a snake. I had to eat a snake. I had all these ugly, awful things, but it did prepare me. The training was so hard that we actually lost a soldier because they gave, in the jungle, when you cross a stream, you don't know whether it's this deep or this deep. And the soldier didn't have his vest on and went right down and passed away. I left for Vietnam twice. In fact, I'd say the average soldier that went to Vietnam left for Vietnam twice. Because up top there is me and Lizzie's parents' living room. That's me on my way to the airport to leave for Vietnam. Down below is a hotel on Waikiki. I left because I had a week's R&R. Every soldier got R&R in Vietnam. So I'm leaving to go back to Vietnam. Bad news is I have seen grown men at the airport on their knees crying because they knew they had to go back. And what do you think Liz felt like kissing me goodbye because she didn't know whether I was going to come back or not. Don't mean to be over dramatic, but that's the way it was. Okay, this is a short synopsis of my tour in Vietnam. To the left is a map. Up top there, my initial assignment was a 2nd Platoon Leader in Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 39th Infantry, 9th Infantry Division. After 6 months in an infantry division, if you're still alive, they reward you by taking you off out of a line and giving you a reassignment. Well, they assigned me to MAC V, which was the assistance command that was trying to train the Vietnamese. And I stayed down in the Delta, and it was four other troopers and myself living out in the middle of nowhere. If you look over to the map, the blue arrows are the 9th Division. We started out at Ben Hoa, and then we shifted down to below Saigon to around Mito. The red arrow is a MAC V, where I spent the last 6 months of my tour. Real quick, not to bore you, this is your standard infantry weapon, M16. By the way, the stories you read about them is a bunch of crap. As long as you cleaned them, they work fine. Light machine gun. I had 4 squads. I wanted 1 machine gun per squad. M79 is a grenade launcher. So if there's some bad guys over by that picture, you just pop a grenade at them. The K-bar. These were standard issue to the Marine Corps in the Army. That was an option. Most of my troops carried a K-bar knife. I didn't because I'm too cheap. I just used a bayonet. Let's talk a little bit about my experience in Vietnam. I was a platoon leader 1 week when the Tet Offensive broke out. We were flown down to the Delta. We received our orders and within hardly knew what the hell we were doing. Put on slicks, Hueys, and sent into a village called Ben Tre. Ben Tre was famous after the Vietnam War. There were books written about it when an Air Force general said, well, we had to destroy it to save it. I had about 30-some people down to 9 people in a half an hour. We were overrun. Thankfully, they were wounded. None of them died. It's incredible. The Tet Offensive is what changed this country's perception of Vietnam, thanks to Walter Cronkite that got the whole thing wrong. That's another subject for another day. Let's talk about LBJ's 100,000. In 1968, we crossed a threshold of 400,000 troops in Vietnam, and we were running out of eligible people. So and the nickname is LBJ's 100,000. What happened, they lowered the standards. And some of the people in my platoon were the 100,000. And I'm not going to say they were dumb, they were slow. And what that did was that cut into your combat effectiveness. Because now you've got squad leaders having to babysit these people, and their job, we're supposed to go out and kill people and win the war. And my heart broke for them because they just were not good enough. And I often think about the homeless. I often think about, in today's world, how many of those people ended up being homeless or something like that because their brain just couldn't function. Next subject is the shadow government. I don't know if you all knew this or not. I didn't know this until I was in MAC V as an advisor. There were 2 governments in Vietnam. During the day, you had the government that you remember. At night, you had the Viet Cong. So here's these poor peasants out in Nowheresville. During the day, they're paying taxes to the government in Saigon. At night, the bad guys, the VC, come in and tax them and take money. So the people in Vietnam didn't even know what a central government was. So part of the problem in our training the Vietnamese is I don't think our leaders understood that. Country and Western music. I swear to God, you as I stand here, it's the reason I'm alive today. Everybody in Vietnam had a little transistor radio, and I get there with my platoon, and every one of them was playing that country and Western music, and I'm going, what the? And my platoon sergeant comes up and he says, sir, you don't understand. That music's going to save your soul, and you're going to get home because of it. And I'm telling you, I learned to like country and Western because somebody was always leaving their girlfriend, or some girlfriend was leaving some guy was dying, some wife was being erected. It's so awful, you feel good about yourself. The next subject is Kool-Aid. In Vietnam, when it's 95 degrees out and you're carrying 50 pounds on your back, you're soaking wringing wet and you're sucking up water left and right. And the water is so putrid and horrible that you would buy Kool-Aid. Either your wife would send it to you in the mail or you'd buy it in the PX. So Kool-Aid is the reason that you were able to inhale all that water. If you were dumb enough to drink out of a stream without taking a purification tablet, you would get, I'll say this nicely, you would wish you were dead for about 2 days. The next important subject is the APO. Am I blocking you guys? Can you see? Is the APO box. In Vietnam, there wasn't any telephones. There wasn't any of this instant communication. My letters to Liz and Liz's letters to me were at least 10 days. So you lived and died for those letters. But for that letter to get to you, it's like a zip code. You have to have the right APO address. And so that was etched in her mind. It was etched in my mind. And the last subject is air assault. This was an unbelievable change in tactics for the military, and I was involved in it. And we're going to get into that a little later because I'm going to let you guys go on a combat assault. Now, for those of you that have never been separated, and I don't mean some 2-week business trip, if you've ever left a spouse and been away for a year, it's tough. 2 different worlds. My wife's over there with her little daughter. I'm over here, 1,000,000 miles away in the Mekong Delta. That mink stole that Liz is wearing, I bought in Hawaii on my way to Vietnam. And the truck pulled up and knocked on her door, and she ran and hid under the bed, because you all know this in the military, that when somebody knocks on the door, you don't get it. Your mother gets it or your friend gets it, because you're so afraid of, okay? She still has that stole. Down below, how many people here have ever heard of Waiting Wives Clubs? Waiting Wives Club? Okay, I got a good audience here. In World War II and in Korea, people were very family-based. You depended on your family when your spouse went to war. In Vietnam, because the spouses tended to be a little more educated, they were living with their mother and father, but they had to get away and they needed somebody to talk to. So all around the United States, Waiting Wives Clubs were formed. And that's three of her dearest friends. The one in the middle became a lifelong friend. And it was the way that these girls could cope because they didn't know if their husband was ever coming back. Over on the right, that's me when I was in MACV. The top photo shows a crossbow. When I tell you I lived in the sticks, man, I lived in the sticks. To the right is, that's me on a Prick 25 radio calling artillery and ordering food or something. Down below shows you the kind of place I lived in Vietnam. And that was some of the better accommodations. Okay, now I'm going to appoint all of you as, you're going to be platoon leaders. We're going to go on an air assault. You are the second platoon leader of Bravo Company, but before I do that, I want to go over some terminology with you. To the left is the UH-1D Iroquois, but you never called it that. You called it a Huey or a Slick. To the right is an AH-1G Cobra gunship. You called it a Snake. The thing on the right's like a sports car with several weapon systems. They're your best friends when you get in trouble. The Huey was a utility helicopter, and that's what you flew out, and that's what you landed on. So it's the spring of 1968, and you're about to take your platoon on a search and destroy mission somewhere in the Delta region, 60 miles south of Saigon, about 7 clicks. 1 click is 1,000 meters. That would be about 4 miles from your company's fire base outside of the town of Mito on Highway 4. Earlier in the morning, you prepared, ready, you briefed your 4 squads. On a good day, I had 26 to 32 in my platoon. TO&E would be 43. They just didn't have the troops. And you've now moved out to your pickup zone, which is a little secondary road adjacent to your fire base. 1st and 3rd platoon are going to come in after you land, and they're going to support you on your left and right if you need them. 4th platoon is in reserve with your company commander. Weather is 95 degrees, humid as hell, but clear visibility. So, being the good platoon leader that you are, you're now on the road, and you're checking in with your boss. Okay, your boss is Bravo 6, that's your company commander, and that's you over to the left, you're Bravo 2-6. So the conversation goes like this: Bravo 6, this is Bravo 2-6 over. In the military, you don't ever say Mr. or Lieutenant Colonel or whatever, you have code names, okay? Over means you've relinquished your push button, and now you're going for him to push his button. He's answering back. This is Bravo 6 over. Bravo 2-6 is telling you that he's at the LZ, Lima Zulu, waiting for the slicks. What's the estimated arrival time? And this is critical. There's 2 kinds of missions in the infantry. It's either a free fire zone or it's a restricted fire zone. Free fire zone means you're allowed to shoot anything that you even think is going to move. So I'm asking, I say again, it's a free fire zone. My boss says, this is Bravo 6, confirmed. It's a free fire zone, it's a free fire zone. Your slicks are going to come in about 3 minutes. Situation report. Estimated platoon minus of Victor Charlie's confirmed. Expect hostile fire as you land. This is telling you that when you're coming in on your slick, the bad guys are probably going to be shooting at you. That's why you carry extra underwear. He's also telling me that this is very normal for the Army, is that before you go in, there will be artillery fire coming down to prep the area. But they have to drop the fire because when you come into land, you can't have the artillery fire. Okay, and he's telling me that I've got snakes on call. That's that little gunship I was telling you about. Be prepared with signal smoke. Everything you do in Vietnam, you use signal smoke because it had different colors. You'd pop the smoke, and the helicopter would say, I see green, and you'd verify. And of course, as my commander always did, he said, Godspeed, Bravo 6, out. So let's start our mission. Here we are. We're on a secondary road, and the helicopters are coming in. So this is what's going through your mind right now. Man, are you focused? You're so focused it ain't even funny. You got a sweat-soaked uniform. You're praying to God like you never prayed before. And you're aligning your squads because when those babies come in, you got to get on those things. There are no seats. It's a floor, so you get in it. I always chose the second helicopter, and I always sat on the right-hand side, and I sat on the floor with my legs extended out, and I'll show you why in a minute. We've gotten in our slicks. We've gone up to 1,200 feet, and we were so relieved because at 1,200 feet, at about 90 knots, it's the best air conditioning you've ever had in your life. However, you now see the objective, which is that tree line. And now your vision expands to where you can see 180 degrees. The door gunners are firing continually because it's a free fire zone. You're anxious, but yet it's controlled, and everything is playing out in slow motion. It's surreal. Okay, so now you know why I sat on that floor and why I had my feet out. Because when that slick got to 3 or 4 feet above the ground, my fanny was out of there, and that's my RTO. That's your RTO in back you getting ready to get out. It's noisy, it's smoky. You try to sight your objective. You try to establish visual contact with your squads. The reason you jump out of that thing at 3 to 4 feet is is because guess what the bad guys like to shoot rockets at? That thing. And one time we jumped out of the helicopter and it took off, and they got it with a rocket. Okay. You got all your troopers out. They're on the ground. They're advancing toward that tree line, but they're taking some small arms fire. And you're confused because you've got to figure out where this stupid fire's coming from. You get your bearings. You're going to direct your squads. You got to locate where those dummies are shooting you. But you are really filthy, stinking, soaking wet from terrain and from sweating. And the fire gets a little more intensive and you are pinned down. Now there's a problem here because that's your RTO. That's the guy with the radio. And you're always 6 feet away from him because you never want to be near him because he's the #1 guy in Vietnam that gets killed because he's got a radio. And the enemy knows if they kill him, I can't call fire support in. So you're about 6 feet in front of him, and he's got his phones. He's going to phone at me, and I'm going to request some help from the gunships, and we're going to have our flanks pop smoke so the gunships know where we are, and we're going to ask the 1st and 3rd platoon to start a flanking motion around us. So, guess what? Good news. The gunships neutralized the bad guys. This is the final terrain feature that we have to cross. One ugly thing about Vietnam was you get in that water, they got some pretty ugly creatures that can get on your uniform. Whew. Okay, so you take prisoners. I might have taken 1 or 2 prisoners in 6 months over there because believe me, we didn't take prisoners. A dust off is what you request if you have a wounded. And then you gather up any intelligence. Intelligence can be anything. It can be a picture, it can be a book, it can be a map. And you guys were lucky. You only had one of your troopers got wounded. So you call the dust off in, and your basic job at this point, since it's a secure area, is you provide security for that medevac helicopter. Probably the bravest pilots in Vietnam, Air Force or Army or Navy or anybody, or these guys that flew with the Red Cross on them. What they did was they should all get very heavy medals as far as I'm concerned. Okay, now we're still stinking, soaking wet. We stink. We killed three Victor Charlies, VC. We didn't have any captured. We're policing up the area. Most important job we had was to blow up their bunkers, because we all carried C4, that's a military explosive with fuses. Go in there and blow the bunker up. And then your CO is going to tell you, hey, you did a great job. Now, go over 500 meters and wait for the helicopters. So here you are. You've popped your smoke. You know, the slicks are coming in. Now look at the expression on their faces. I'm telling you, they are mentally absolutely wasted. That's you right there. Good news, end of mission. As you can see, the helicopters are taking off. You can also see these people are on their knees, they're so damn tired. So you go back to your camp. You may draw an ambush that night, and you will clean your weapon. I had one standard operating procedure in my platoon. I made them clean their weapons every day, whether they were in the field or not, because I think that's what saved a lot of people, a lot of lives. And of course, you chow down. Here's something you've probably never seen before. Okay. Once again, I was in Vietnam at the time of cutting-edge technology. To your left are the infamous C rations, probably weighed 3 pounds. How'd you like to take 3 days' worth of rations on your 55-pound back already? Not too much fun. To the right, long-range patrol, they came in I guess they came in about May or June when I was over there. It was a godsend. I don't even think they weigh a pound. All you need is a canteen full of water, and you can cook that stuff. The piece of paper up there, I don't think you can read, but they show you the insanity of war. My first week in Vietnam, they put you through training, right? So we're just about through training. And when you go to training, every class you get, they tell you, if you don't listen to this, you're going to die. After the second day, we know we're going to die. The last class we get is dental care. What is the last thing you want? We're all going to die. We don't need clean teeth. And basically what this stupid thing says is that don't forget your toothbrush. I mean, if you're in a firefight, do you think you're going to think about a toothbrush? And then it says if you don't have a toothbrush, is to take a twig and scrape the bark off and use it as a toothpick. Do you think I'm putting anything in my mouth in Vietnam? You crazy? On the bottom, P-38 can opener. Anybody that's ever been to Vietnam always had a P-38. That's my dog tags there with a P-38 on it. That's how you opened up those cans. If you didn't have a P-38, you'd have to take a knife or a bayonet and do it, and you'd wreck your meal. If you notice, my dog tags have engineering electrical tape around them. The reason you tape dog tags together is they don't make any noise. Because when you're on ambush, okay? One thing that's not shown there is water purification tablets and also malaria tablets. We lost so many people because of malaria, it wasn't even funny. Enough of that crap. Okay, I'm home from Vietnam, and I had time with Lizzie and the family, and so I chose to have two different careers. I'm very blessed. I had a civilian career with the Bud Company, and I had my U.S. Army Reserves career. And so the more I'm thinking about it, they kind of paralleled each other. The Bud Company was a huge industrial concern. It had a structure similar to the military, except that it was union. But my promotions, it's kind of neat the way it worked. I'm very blessed that I was able to have two careers with progressive promotions. I retired in 03 from the Bud Company and 97 from the Reserves. Lizzie retired in 01 from Colonial School District. We moved to an over 55 community in Creamery, Pennsylvania, and we came to good old Tie Point in 2013. Okay, this next one, Liz keeps telling me, don't ever use the term Tier 1 auto supplier because nobody knows what it is. I'm going to explain it to you. The Bud Company supplied to the automotive industry the capacity to make more because they don't have the money to have enough capacity to make the vehicles that they can sell. So we were a link to them. We produced body panels, doors, hoods, deck lids, roofs for all of these people here, all these companies. Ford was our primary supplier. In the 1980s, we got the Ford Econoline. Remember the Econoline van? Well, that was sold at about 80,000 units. We were doing 300,000 a year. Can you imagine the profit from 80,000 up to 300? That's where we made our money. We would bid on these jobs and hope that the volume would go up, so you would clean up. BMW was an interesting customer. The X5, I think that's the medium-size SUV. We did all that sheet metal for them. They were, let's just say they were typical Germans. Boy. We had a good relationship with Chevrolet for years. We were pressing out over 1 million fenders for them a year in my plant alone. Everything is going great during the 70s, man. We're making all kind of money. Life is good. The union's even being halfway decent to us. And all of a sudden, the Japanese had been here, and all of a sudden, quality became an issue. Anybody that was in production, I'm not talking accounting, I'm not talking about human relations, I'm talking about anybody involved in production. When that thing hit, that quality hit in the 80s, it was unbelievable. The quality assurance manager used to sit all the way down the end of the table at the staff meeting. He's now sitting next to the plant manager. Everybody's in the quality because it was so critically important that we stopped this influx of the Japanese. And the Japanese stole every quality thing from us. Dr. Richard Deming, everybody remember Dr. Deming? He's the godfather of quality. We had to bring him back from Japan because over there he was worshipped as a god. So now that's the 1980s. Now we get into lean manufacturing because now the bean counters take over. And they say, look, you've got 30 days of inventory here. You ought to really have it. Can you do something about it? So once again, we went to the Japanese, and the Japanese said, Japanese used to come over here and visit our facilities. Now we're going over there to visit their facilities. So lean manufacturing means you've reduced your inventory. Let's say, typically in my plant, before we started, we had 30 days from the time steel came in until we shipped product, okay? Lean manufacturing, we got that down to 3 days. In, pressed them out, and shipped them. Millions of dollars were saved. I'm very proud of myself that I went to several schools on lean manufacturing. I brought lean manufacturing in for our company, and it was not an easy thing to sell because you've got people stereotyped, you've got used to working a certain way. They want all these extra allowances because they're so afraid they're going to miss their target and run out of product. And so that was working pretty good. And now let's talk about the union. Yay, union. The UAW, at the time I was employed, was basically a clean union. It was not the Teamsters, and it was not the other notoriously bad unions. We had a good working relationship with them. They had a lot of power. But when you get into quality and when you start telling an employee you have the right to shut a line down, that's a lot of power for an employee. The unions changed. The unions in the late 80s and then in the 90s when I was there, unions became kind of like a benevolent association. They were interested in health care. They got very much into drug treatment programs because in smokestack industries, drug use was a real problem. Just as bad as it is today, maybe worse, because when you have employees working on assembly lines, you just imagine the ramifications of that. So the good part about the unions were that they did get into that, and they did serve some good. Last category is robotics. What drove us into robotics was the union, because they kept negotiating contracts, and we kept paying more and more and more. And when you're a supplier, your boss is the company, the GM or the Ford. You just can't up your price. You have to negotiate everything. So that drove us into robotics. And robotics are kind of neat because you all look at that picture and you think that orange thing there it's all about that thing, that's the robot. That's only about 5% of it. It's the environment, it's the space around that robot, it's how you service that robot, and God forbid if you have employees anywhere near that robot. I personally had a machinist killed because he got in that work cell when he wasn't supposed to be, and that arm swung around and killed him. That leads me to my OSHA story. Have anybody here ever dealt with OSHA, Occupational Health and Safety? It's like 19-year-old kids coming in and telling 50-year-old people how they ought to run their business. And they do have the power to fine you, and they will fine you. Okay, this is my first patent. And rapid robotic assembly change. The important thing here is that it's a system. It is not the robot. In other words, we took in our business, we made a lot of small parts, reinforcements, and stuff like that. And you needed space to make these things. But if you could develop tooling that would allow you to make the same part over the same tooling, you can save thousands, millions of dollars. So my little group and myself that I was in charge of, we did this. And this was, when I left, this was still an industry standard. As you can see, it says assignee, the Bud Company. They got all the royalties. I got 3 weeks vacation. I had a lot of fun doing it. We had people from different disciplines that worked together. We got the union involved because we had to there's so many different classifications in the union workforce. We had to consolidate those things, had special agreements. Still proud of that. And here's my favorite Germans. In the 80s, Thyssen. Anybody know Thyssen? Okay. Thyssen was probably the best thing that ever happened to the Bud Company. They came in and bought all the stock. They were benevolent. They gave us capital. They let us expand. We built a plant in Mexico, down in Argentina. Built a new plant in Shelbyville, Kentucky. They left us alone as long as we made money. And then Krupp comes along and has a hostile takeover of Thyssen. And if anybody here remembers in World War II, Krupp Steel, okay, Krupp Steel is what killed our GIs. When they took over Thyssen, it made it all the way to Congress whether they were going to allow them to operate in this country because of the hatred from the name Krupp. So I guess they paid off enough people, and they did. And all Krupp cared about was our intellectual property. They closed 10 plants. They shut our company up. They shuttered it. I closed that plant. That's the Philadelphia Assembly plant. Everything you see is the plant. We had 5,000 employees at one time. We were able to negotiate a pension for our union people. And I'm talking about people that were not old enough to retire or have enough seniority. If they had at least 20 years in, we got them $20,000 a year. That doesn't sound like much. But to a union person with nothing, it's better than nothing. And the union, we were able to got benefit for them. Because of that plant there, I was given a golden parachute. It's one of the reasons I can afford to live at Tide Point. Painful experience to close it. Because when you're in a manufacturing facility, your heart's in that thing. Man, when you walk down a production line and you hear that machinery, most wonderful noise in the world. Even better than our symphony. Okay. I'm in the Army Reserves, and notice this thing up there, twice the citizen. That's a very popular term for the reserves, because when I'm at the Bud Company, I have to know all this business stuff. Put my uniform on, I got to know all this military stuff. So, you know, it's not easy. The Muriel boat lift. Who remembers the Muriel boat lift from Cuba? Okay, a little bit of background. Our boy Castro got sick of the people protesting, so he opened up some insane asylums and jails and dumped all those Cubans on the boats, and they came over to Florida, overwhelmed Florida, so they opened up several military installations that were basically World War II training camps. Fort Indiantown Gap was 2 hours from where I lived in my unit. We happened to be going up there for 2 weeks of summer training, and I don't know who did it, but somebody asked the Army if they needed our help. Traditionally, hardcore military people reject Guard and reserves. We're secondary citizens to them. They want no parts of us. We hadn't been used since World War II. So, we go to Indiantown Gap, and only the Army can do this. They have a company from the 82nd Airborne. Okay, that's great. That's a lieutenant colonel. I had my boss, my company commander was a lieutenant colonel. And then there was another lieutenant colonel that was the chief of staff. And they sent a one-star general up there to oversee everything, except we were in charge of inside the wire. We were doing everything in the camp. The regular Army was doing everything outside. So now I've got 4 bosses, and I had a Jeep. And every morning I used to go to each boss, and they'd ring me out and tell me everything I did wrong. Go to the next guy, go to the next guy, go to the next guy. That's when I learned to say, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Long story short, I have seen people that came up out of Cuba. I've seen gashes in their side where Fidel Castro unleashed German shepherds on them. In Latin America, it's called machismo. You don't want to be gay in Latin America, okay? So, Salvation Army sends these packages up with cosmetics in for the women. So I'm looking out the window one day, and I see these midgets like this tall, and they're smeared up with lipstick and rouge and everything. They're having a good old time. They were able to come out of their closet, because they'd be killed in Cuba. You can't make this crap up. So the boat lift was somewhat successful. The Congress got their act together and everybody worked for these Cubans. And to this day, I'm pretty sure if a Cuban sets foot on American soil, I think they get to stay. Pretty sure. Operation Urgent Fury, anybody remember that? The Grenada rescue mission? Ronald Reagan. Once again, I have the United States Navy to thank for this. My unit was detailed to the Atlantic Fleet for civil affairs because the Navy has no civil affairs. Civil affairs basically is the group of people that focus on the government and civilians to make the commander's job to win the war easier. So, Urgent Fury. The Cubans were in Grenada. They were building a 7,000-foot runway, and basically it was going to be a jumping off point for South America. The bad guys, the commies, took over, killed the civilian leadership. The Eastern Caribbean islands requested help. So Ronald Reagan and his Defense Department got together and launched Operation Urgent Fury. In a nutshell, we dropped the 82nd dropped down on the main airport. Navy SEALs took over a radio station. And I get a phone call from Norfolk, with the Atlantic Fleet headquarters, asking if I can possibly get down there. So I had a couple weeks vacation, so I took it. I said, Liz, I can't tell you where I'm going. And she said, get out of here, you're going to Grenada. And so I get down to Norfolk dressed like Joe College. I'm met with a guy, a Marine guard about this tall, with an M16, and they take me in. I have to show 87 sets of ID, and they take me into a little room with a direct radio contact to Grenada. Hey, Lee Niner here. Well, what do you need? The guy says, we need some people that understand mental hospitals, telephone system, blah, 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 blah. I said, I got all those people. We can get them to you. And made a phone call back to the Reserve Center. We got some 6 or 7 volunteers with specific areas of expertise. Civil affairs probably has more expertise in it than any small town in America because of the way it's set up. I was in the lower 4th degree-wise in my company that I ran. So everything's going great. We get the guys, we get them airlifted down to Fort Bragg. The Army would not cut orders on them. They refused to cut orders because they were reservists and they'd never used reserves before. So it's been more than 7 years and I can't go to Leavenworth. My first sergeant and I got into the orderly room of the special warfare down there. They all were at lunch, and we typed up sets of orders for these people. We getting short on time? Okay. Bottom line is we got him into Grenada. I went down for a couple of days to see what was going on, and very rewarding experience for me. I went back 3 more times, and I wrote the official end of mission report. Arlington National Cemetery, that's me over to the right. That's the proudest thing I've ever done in my life. Went down and placed a wreath of flowers at the Arlington National Cemetery. Just a wonderful experience. Real quick, PTSD, okay? I'm suffering from PTSD. I was told that a couple of months ago, and they told me if I talked about this crap, it would be better for me. I don't know. Reason I say that is I think a lot of the homeless problem is, I said this earlier, is because PTSD. Vietnam Memorial, the one over there is what you all know. Anybody that's a veteran from Vietnam, that's for the people that died. The other 2 are for us that lived. And I'll hurry this up. We're going to skip that. We'll do real quick with MGs. That's our 3 MGs. And that all 3 of them took pewter at that car show. That's our first one, MGTD. Second one was an MGB. And that's our favorite, MGA. These are some of the trips we've been on. 38 years, Lizzie and I did this. We shipped our car to England. My picture at the top left is my favorite. That's in Bath. That's a 400-year-old farm that's been tenant farmed for 400 years. Over in England, they don't really own the land. The people in the castles own it. Anne Hathaway's cottage in Stratford, great shot. Loch Ness Monster, the hedge behind there, that's up in Inverness. And there's Liz and me waiting to get the car on the boat. All we want to do is go to a pub and get a pint of bitter. Ocean to Ocean 2017, that's us leaving. The middle top, we were getting ready to go from Seligman, Arizona. It was 107 degrees that day. Car ran great. We didn't, but the car ran great. There is a Niner winery. We visited that. That's Lizzie and me in Santa Barbara. We made it. That's going on to the car show field. We took second place there after driving 4,200 miles. Shipped the car home, and that's me thanking God it made it in one piece. MG, real quick here. Liz took first place at New Hope in '92. Down the bottom, both of us took racing lessons at Summit Point. That was a lot of fun. And if something can go wrong, it will. And it's always a spare part that you don't have. That engine was rebuilt twice in the MGT. The MGB got a cracked head. This picture here made a national magazine. I took it. Liz was so used to breaking down, it's all she did was take out her romance novel. And the theme of this is don't leave home without them. AAA and Visa. MG Collectibles, we just sold our entire collection last month, over 250 pieces. I had offers from all over the world, but I refused to pack it, so some guy lived in, where do you live, West Virginia or West Virginia? He came with a trailer and packed everything up as I watched him. So that was a lifetime of collecting. And that's the end. I thank you for your time. And by the way, Liz and I swear by the two comments there, Liz and I swear with that. Trust me. You have to look at it. You only die once, man. You live every day. Thank you all. You're welcome.
Hopefully we'll see you next month. We have Penny Woolhouse who's going to tell her story. And so forth. That will be the second, it's always the second Monday of the month. Penny Woolhouse. Hope to see you there. Have a nice night and enjoy your dinner.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service, Colonel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.